TV.
Welcome back and many thanks for staying with us right here in Morning at NTV. You're still on a joyride with Romeo Busiku right here on NTV Uganda. It's info filled, and yes, you'll be getting some of the information that is making headlines right here in Uganda and elsewhere in the world. Before the schools reopen, what measures do we have to institute as school proprietors to ensure that the children and the students, as they go back in the candidate classes, yes, they are safe and write their exams without any problem? Kenya refused. They said, we do not know the how. The how was so plaguing that Uhuru Kenyatta said, no, I would rather open the bars because that is simpler to understand. The restaurants, it's also simpler to understand. But then the schools, no. Here in Uganda, the president was like, the bars no, but the students, the candidate classes, the students in the candidate classes can go back to school and finish those exams. What about the parents? They were milked dry as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Where's the school fees going to come from? What can government do to help these parents? The students themselves, they've been at home. Some are not learning. Some are in the border districts. They couldn't go ahead with long-distance learning on the radios or the TVs. Some were so poor or are still poor, they do not have TVs or radios. Government promised to provide these radios, but so far, it's been a slow process. But what can be done in the interim to ensure that as students go back to school, yes, they are better prepared? My name is Romeo Busiku, and I would like to introduce Edison, that is Mr. Edison Nsubuga, the head of education, Save the Children. He joins me right now in studio. A very good morning, sir.
Good morning, and thank you for hosting me.
Well, this is a very contentious subject that we are discussing right now. Reopening of schools. What needs to be done?
Well, I think there are many questions, fewer answers, but collectively we can think of how schools can reopen safely. First and foremost, I think Uganda, His Excellency and the Ugandan government took a very bold step to announce the reopening of the schools because it is the best thing to be done. First and foremost, we don't have any timelines for the COVID pandemic when it will end, and so the economy has to gradually open, and so is schools and education. And of course, education means life. Education means progress, development for the young ones. So in the best interest of the children of Uganda, I think thinking of strategies to reopen schools is a good decision for which Save the Children and other NGO actors commend the government too. But that being said, we need to make sure that the reopening is actually safe. Children are safe in school, children are protected, and of course, Minister of Education, with the support from Minister of Health, have already put in place guidelines which will support school operators, teachers and students to take initiatives of protection while schools reopen. Of course, there are broader issues concerning the economic situation, the social situation, the health situation, but what is at heart here is the best interest of the child. What is the best for the child? Looking at the statistics during these 6 months when schools have been closed, children have gone through a very big challenges. We have shocking statistics in terms of teenage pregnancies, exceeding the known percentages we know. In some districts like in northern Uganda, in Noya, we have been following up, and cases of teenage pregnancies are growing day by day to tunes of over 400%. It is very difficult to imagine.
So these are young girls out of school?
These are young girls out of school. A number of young girls and boys have gone into child labor. Others have also adopted very negative coping mechanisms. And I think if we're to progress like this, the future for children is very bleak. And that's why efforts to reopen schools are welcome. But like said, we need to ensure that safety and health are all taken into consideration.
But before we veer into safety, let's talk about preparedness of these students getting back to the schools. How best should we prepare them mentally and psychologically?
Good question. I think there is a big challenge that a big number of children will not return to school unless if specific intervention campaign to take them back to school.
What are those specific interventions?
Into place. First and foremost, we need to engage the parents and the communities because these are really very critical stakeholders. Reopening schools is not just enough. A number of children we have interacted with in the different areas we operate in the refugee settlements in northern Uganda, in Karamoja, actually some of them have lost interest in learning. So the starting point is how do we regain this interest in learning? Secondly, how do we ensure that everybody within the community, within the family, is emphasizing the message about protection? Because there is a fear. Some children genuinely fear that probably when they get back to school, they might get affected by the disease. So, but there are measures which are already in place, and there are guidelines Ministry of Education has shared with all the stakeholders on seeing how safety in school is going to be managed. And so in that context, then children are prepared, but also it is important to prepare the teachers because the teachers are providing the first line of support to these children when they come.
And of course, you know, the teachers were grappling with economic challenges. You had teachers frying chapatis, teachers selling, you know, working those menial jobs to make a living. So now we are reopening schools. Look at the mental state of that teacher. How best can we prepare the teachers also? Well,
the teachers, just like the students, are all affected psychologically, and they are in a very awkward state of mind. And of course, to impart knowledge, to help a person understand, to help another person, you have to be helped as well. So one of the key fundamentals when the schools reopen is ensure that the well-being of the teachers, both the physical, the social and psychological well-being of the teachers is addressed. And of course, this alludes to what you mentioned, that the school heads and the owners have a big toll to see that they mobilize the resources to ensure that all these elements are factored in. Of course, one critical component to factor in is the social well-being of the teacher. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for the teachers to navigate a process, a recovery process, when their own state of mind is at stake. Similarly, a number of children are going to come back with the very negative attitudes to learning. In terms of discipline, they are going to be a little bit difficult. So we need interventions to do with the psychosocial support to learners and teachers and other workers within schools, because
so that would warrant a psychosocial support center in every school just to handle those cases.
Yeah, and where resources do not permit, of course, personnel could be trained, and a few of them could keep supporting others. Otherwise, it is not going to be business as usual that children will just walk into school. There is a need to prepare. There is a need to prepare the learners, the teachers, but also other staff within the school to be able to support.
And outside the
process.
school, the parents who are supposed to be sending the students back to school are grappling economically. This pandemic has had very debilitating effects on the economic implications of these parents. Now, what do you have to say about those parents for now? What can government do for them? They had paid their first-time school fees. Can they use that same money in this third term?
Well, I would say that there has never been any better time for parents. As we all aware, school reopening period is always a period of panic to everybody because of resources. So resources will never be there. COVID has brought in a situation which is not going to change. Everybody's economy status has been affected, and we need to see how we begin picking ourselves piece by piece and restart all over again. So just like it has been previously, that it has been a challenge getting all what children need, it is going to be the same situation. So this needs to be a conversational between parents and the school leadership, but also government, of course, has an angle to support, and of course the number of initiatives the government is taking, which I cannot speak authoritatively about.
Not really just an angle, Edison and Subuga. Government should really take on this whole issue. That's what I'm getting from some education experts. If parents do not have money, they won't be able to give the students the requirements that they need to go to school, aside from the PPEs, even though government is offering 2 face masks to each student. What about the pads? Can I send my daughter to school without a pad? I've already exhausted all the money. This is when we should be talking about the role of government to help the parents, who can also in turn help the students to actually veer into this new normal.
Well, I think, yes, I agree with you. Government has a big role, but I would very much want to focus myself from the child perspective, because a child is a beneficiary of all this, is in the center of the play. The parents are grappling with the economics. The government is grappling with other elements, but here is a child who is looking forward for a future. And one of the gateway to that future is education. So how does this child get supported? Of course, the support will be coming from all those angles, and everybody needs to play a part. Government will definitely play a part. Parents primarily will play a big part, and of course other stakeholders will. Save the Children as an organization is supporting a number of schools in northern Uganda, in Karamoja, in central region in Wakiso, to see how we work together to prepare these schools ready for receiving the children. But like I say, I'm not underestimating the challenge ahead.
All right, Edison and Subuga, we also have information that indicates that 2 weeks back, France reopened schools. Yes, but then we saw 5 days later, on a Friday, 20 schools were locked down. Do you envisage a situation in Uganda here where we might follow suit after reopening?
Yes, 2 things. Discipline is going to be very, very important, because this reopening process has been broadly and widely thought about. And of course, the risk is that if schools do not do X, Y, Z, the likelihood of the challenge can...
So let's interrogate the don'ts.
So as we plan to reopen the schools, first and foremost, we should not underestimate the need for the protective information provided. There are 2 angles. One is information, and this information alludes to behavior change. For instance, hand hygiene, washing hands. I think a number of schools will be able to do this. There are simple approaches which can be done, like a tippy tap, which will cost actually less than $2 to put in place. Of course, the challenge will be availability of water, but that is where other stakeholders come in. But also encouraging children to put on the respiratory mechanism, like the face mask and others, will be very critical. So as we reopen schools, we have to abide by the standard operating procedures put in place by the Ministry of Health, but also the guidelines which have been contextualized by Ministry of Education, to ensure that as we open, then we don't go into the resurgence. That is why the gradual phasing of the reopening is the most logical step. And I believe a few weeks after some children have reported back to school, there will be evaluation of the situation, and that will inform whether we go forward with other classes being reopened. And I believe in that we shall be able to circumvigate the challenges other countries have.
But Mr. Subuga, we shouldn't forget this very big development that is coming in, that some schools might never reopen because of the economic consequences. Since March, they've not been operational. Now, imagine you're opening only candidate classes. Imagine we have only 7 in primary 7, 7 in senior 4, and 7 in senior 6. Will that money that will be collected from these students be enough to run the school? So such challenges, even the grant that the 20 billion President Museveni gave to the private teachers, it was also swindled. So such issues, don't you envisage a situation whereby we reopen schools and some candidates are still at home simply because the school that they're supposed to go to does not have the money to even enforce the SOPs?
Yes, and for that very reason, that is why we need a serious campaign of taking back every child to school, a serious campaign or to engage government to see how they can support. It is true, a number of schools have been sold off. Others actually in very bad state that they may not reopen. But despite all those challenges, we need to continue engaging government and other stakeholders to do what they can do to ensure that reopening is safe.
Edison Soboga, I've been talking to some educationists and they are content that instead of government talking about what schools need to be doing, like what measures they need to institute to enforce the SOPs, government should be providing the tools that they need to enforce the standard operating procedures. What do you make of that? Well, because you might tell me to enforce the measures, but I do not have the tools.
Yes, the issue of the tools is important, and of course enforcement is always a very big challenge. And where there is laxity in enforcement, of course we shall land into problems. Government will play its part and the other stakeholders will continue playing their part, but at the end of the day there is always a starting point, and the time is now to gradually begin reopening school in a safe and secure manner for both children and their
But the good news is that we've interrogated this issue. Now the parents, the teachers, the children, and the proprietors of the schools know what they need to do before we open the schools. Thank you very much, Edison Nsubuga, the head of education at Save the Children.
Thank you.
Well, you can stay seated. You're still watching Morning at NTV. I'd like to take this opportune moment to wish a joyous birthday to all the kings, queens, boys and girls who are celebrating their birthdays on this particular Thursday. My name is Romeo Bisiku. Let's interface tomorrow, same time. Good morning.